workshop is next.
Put it on both items, right?
Yes.
Share.
Featured? At this time, we'll do a policy workshop. I'd like to invite Deputy Superintendent Keith Oswald and his team forward to go through this workshop. Thank you.
No, Diane's gonna drive. Which one's first?
Yeah, we have a number of policies that we will be workshopping today. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Glenna Sheffield.
Threat assessment. Okay. They're all in that. Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman Barbieri, Vice Chair Shaw, board members, Dr. Fenoy. This afternoon, we are coming before you with the new policy for threat assessment, which is a requirement of Senate Bill 7026-7030. We will be introducing the process outlined during today's presentation. And June Issa, our Assistant Superintendent for our student wellness, is going to be leading us through our threat assessment.
Good afternoon, board members, Dr. Fenoy. As we have discussed at other workshops and other opportunities, we are following the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School Public Safety Act, and you've heard a lot about the mental health allocations. This is the other part of the initiative that needs to be put in place, and it's a threat assessment policy. We are going to bring forward language that is going to be put in place here in Palm Beach County starting the new school year. But we are still looking for guidance from the state, so we might be coming back at another time to address policy changes. I just wanted to put that up in the front. I'm going to turn it over to Kelly Mullen, Manager for Safe Schools, to go through the next slides.
Actually, I am starting the next slide.
Diane Wyatt.
You will see on the slide now the definition of threat assessment. That definition comes to us from Dr. Dewey Cornell. He is the author of the School Threat Assessment, Interventions and Support to Prevent Violence book. He also is endorsed by the state and is offering training in which Kelly has attended. Through Senate Bill 7026, we do have specific outlines as to who should make up the team for threat assessments. They are listed there. Department of Safe Schools is also responsible for the training for those team members. Now Kelly Mullen is going to talk to us about the levels of threats.
Thank you, Diane, and good afternoon. The low, medium, and high levels of threat were created by Dr. Cornell, and as Diane stated, they are supported by the Florida Department of Education. Our current process requires that threat assessment teams to determine the level of a threat. The process assists in standardizing the appropriate response, interventions, and supports needed for threats that occur across our district. Next slide. When assessing a potential threat or concerning behavior, the threat assessment team must determine not only whether a threat has been made or communicated, but also if a person poses a danger to themselves or others, or if they are potentially on the pathway towards violence. Senate Bill 7030 states that the Florida Department of Education will create and provide a standardized threat assessment instrument for all schools. The deadline for the Florida Department of Ed to deliver that instrument is August 1st, and yes, that is tomorrow. As of right now, we have not received that instrument from them. We're anxiously awaiting for that. However, if needed, the Department of Safe Schools has a threat assessment instrument that was successfully piloted last spring. Both the initial threat assessment instrument and the follow-up forms are available, and they are ready to go and be implemented in our school district.
And that concludes our workshop on the threat assessment policy. At the next board meeting, we will be bringing forward language. Again, we are still waiting for that guidance, and we're hopeful that we can tweak that language before we bring it forward to you, so we would not have to come back and do it again. Questions?
Can I just add, the the chair asked a question. The reason why we're not putting on the board item for adoption is because I gave staff direction to create the threat assessment prior to us waiting for the state to give it to us because we had deadlines to meet. So again, we created something, and once we get direction from the state, we'll tweak it as we did with other processes along this journey.
If I may, Mr. Superintendent, Mrs. Rico, so is there a way to expedite so we don't have to go several readings on that policy so we can get it in place as close as possible to the beginning of the new school year?
Well, you can put it on track, but there's just a certain amount of days for the first read and second read, and it's,
That's what I'm asking. Is there a way to skip any of those readings? And no?
no.
Okay. Ms. McQuinn, go ahead.
This is an easy question. Not having received the instrument from the state yet, and I think I heard you say that we successfully implemented something. Okay, how do we know it's successfully implemented?
So we actually, I know Kelly, and I'll defer it back to Kelly, but last year we went to some trainings with the person who's doing the instrument. So ours is built off of what we're hopeful the state will come forward with. But successful implementation is that we sent it out to the school centers as we had threats from students, and we allowed the school centers to work through the process with us, and then we made any tweaks that were necessary. So that's when we say successful, meaning that the tool worked for the school center for them to be able to walk through a threat had happened on their campus.
That's great. Thank you.
Training.
Mrs. Andrews?
Thank you. And you did that training. Was it like with other districts, or can you help me? Have you seen what they've actually come up with when you did the training, or was it some local training?
Yeah, it was local training, but it was built off of what we got from Cornell Dewey, Dr. Dewey, and also what we have articulated with other counties on what we're doing. And Kelly actually led the training. I don't know if you want to jump in and add.
Sure. The process that we have in place was built off of a couple of different trainings. One was I attended a training that was held in Palm Beach County, led by the FBI in alliance with the United States Secret Service. So those components are also infused into Dr. Cornell's work through the threat assessment guide. So the state has embraced his work. We were just fortunately enough to have already embraced that early on and had the system in place. I attended his full-week training where the state was actually in attendance as well. We are in alignment with what his vision is and what the state apparently has adopted. So we are closely aligned with what it looks like they're going. Well, they've already decided they've adopted, and they're doing the training throughout the state. So.
I just want to take a point. Mr. Barbieri clarified some of these deadlines that came up. The August 1st this year deadline was the state to provide resources to districts on their forms. I want to go back a year, in 7026, that was part of threat assessments, was part of that bill. We started training last school year around threat assessment. It was embedded within our student code of conduct policy. Since then, the Stoneman Douglas had a number of meetings throughout. They clarified that districts, and it later came about in 7030 that we had to have an independent policy around threat assessments. That particular policy, and it's stated in 7030, will be due August 1st of 2021, where a policy has to be provided to the State Board of Education. So by statute, we're still required to, any threat that comes into our district, to assess those at the schools. Our schools are conducting it. They've been conducting it. This will clarify the process, and we'll have our own independent policy around threat assessments.
Thank you.
And then I think it's important, June and I were here talking, that the threat assessment training that the department have been putting on, it's a mandatory training for all school principals. And we're constantly monitoring in regards to if we have any school-based leaders that have not attended that training, notifying principal supervisors and working directly with the principals to make sure that we get them in for the necessary training.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you. Next.
Yes, please move on to the next policy.
Our next policy that we're going to bring forth is our student code of conduct. The student code of conduct comes before the board each year with proposed changes based on legislation and principal input. June Issa again is going to lead us through this particular policy.
The changes this year are minimal, but we are required to bring it forward, so I'm just going to glance over those, and then I'm going to turn it over to the rest of the team. The proposed changes for this year are going to be around language that references our on- and off-campus activities. We've had conversations with our principals, and they wanted us to embed language that was covers like prom and other activities that we have that take place off of our campuses. Threat assessment definition, we just discussed why that needed to be embedded inside of our student code of conduct. And then we are also going to be asking to introduce some new local and state discipline incident codes.
Okay, that's me. The current code of conduct version has language that addresses the expected conduct when participating in school activities on campus. However, the principals requested additional language to address off-campus school-sponsored activities in more detail. This language defines the activities where the student code of conduct applies to students' behaviors when representing the school at events that are not on campus. As mentioned in the previous presentation, the threat assessment definition is new to the student code of conduct. However, it is required based on Senate Bill 7026 and 7030.
In regards to adding some new incident codes, we have requesting that we add 2 incident codes that will help us identify and track the data of tobacco and drug use when delivered through an electronic nicotine device or a vape, so that we can then have more knowledge of that impact on campuses. And as talked about at last week's board workshop, we are introducing a code for level 4 code for weapons that we discussed last week at the meeting.
Before you move on, and maybe, I know somebody mentioned last week, can you, in case somebody asked me in our policy, what is a dirk and what is a slingshot?
Lisa's done the most research. Ms. Carmona, I apologize.
I'm sorry. I am not particularly well versed on any of these items, but a slingshot appeared to me to be nothing more than a glorified slingshot. As we would all know it, it's some kind of a mechanism where you pull something back and you expel a projectile. That was my interpretation. When I read the slingshot, I immediately thought slingshot. The dirk, Kelly, do you remember exactly what a dirk was?
Yes, these are medieval devices from what I could find on Google. So a dirk is what appears to be a maritime knife or an old Scottish-Irish knife. Since my name is Kelly, I got a little bit familiar with that. So, but yes, and I agree with Lisa with the slingshot. The best I could find was a rope with a knot at the end of it, which I've never seen in person, but that stood quite the conversation with us as well. So.
And I can assure the board we've not had either of those on any of our referrals in many years.
Karen?
Thank you. And, I think that I'm happy to see about the student conduct while waiting for school transportation. But, that's been a big issue. It's always been an issue where we get complaints about what goes on at the bus stop. So we've got to make sure we really communicate to the students that your behavior at the bus stops has to be, correct. And because it is going to be a problem. Because I think many of them realized in years past that, we didn't have the authority to step in. So that's a big change, and hopefully we can communicate that to the parents as well.
All right.
One more slide.
Thank you. Let's move on to 5.18, right?
Okay, our next presentation, as Ms. Issa's bringing it up, is our Teen Parent Program. As discussed last week, Teen Parent was removed from the Alternative Education Manual, and we have updated Policy 5.27 to include the services for our parenting teams.
I'm trying to find it. There it is. And much of this was discussed last week, but I just wanted to put a slide in here because we are going to bring new language forward. But historically, the Teen Parent Program was a dropout prevention program, and we sent students to alternative sites. Historically, That was our past practices over the last 10 years. Of course, that has shifted, and we have some data in one of these bullets that talks about 62% of our teenage parent program participants stay at their home schools, and 26 are enrolled in charter schools, and only 11% of those students are enrolled in any of alternative sites. So we have removed that language from our alternative ed manual, and we're making a separate policy for that, and that's what we're bringing forward tonight.
Seeing no questions, we'll move on to student progression plans.
Okay, as Ms. Easter is pulling up our student progression plan is updated yearly to reflect changes in Florida statutes and district policies and practices. Diana Fetterman, Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning, is going to be leading this discussion.
So good evening. The changes that we have in our student progression plan for this year for our elementary schools involve aligning our student performance levels in our student performance charts to be more aligned with the report card in reading, adding approaching grade level to the reading charts to indicate for those students that are close to grade level but not quite there yet, and then revising the promotion and the retention columns to better align with the reading intervention decision trees. Here's an example of an updated performance chart, and then today you received the K-5 ones as well, but inside the PowerPoint you will see the grade 4 example. For the reading intervention for elementary, we have made the revisions there to better align with the new statute language, including specifying that students with a substantial reading deficiency in K-3 receive an individual progress monitoring plan. So they will now have an individual PMP if they have a substantial reading deficiency in K-3. Moving forward, in House Bill 7071, in middle school, in order to be promoted to grade 9, students have to complete a career planning course. It is called a career planning course in statute language, but that course is actually embedded inside of another course inside of middle school. The state DOE provides us with a list of courses in which we're permitted to embed that course. We are embedding that into our U.S. history courses, which most of our middle schools offer in grade 8. So that will be embedded in starting this upcoming year. So all of our students will have that completed in order to be promoted to grade 9. And then some course substitutions for computer science. This is an exciting new option that we're able to provide to students. So students have the option to substitute a computer science course, and from the list of courses provided by the DOE, for one of their mathematics high school graduation requirements. Students must have 4 mathematics credits in order to graduate high school. They can substitute a computer science course for one of them, with the exception of they cannot substitute out for algebra or for geometry, as those are specific graduation requirements. And then for science, students must have 3 science credits for high school graduation. They can use a computer science course to substitute out for one of those science courses, with the exception of biology, which is a specific graduation requirement. The statute does note that they cannot use that same computer science class to double dip, basically, to sub out the same science class and sub out a math class. House Bill 7071 also outlines a career and technical education graduation pathway, which has a minimum 18 credit option and outlines a pathway for a student to earn 18 credits, have a minimum cumulative GPA of 2 credits. You see their entire course outlined there. But if students also earn the 2 credits in a career education course, earning an industry certification, and then pick up the remaining 2 credits to total the 18 in elective courses, and a half a credit of that in that financial literacy that's required education, they can earn that career and technical education pathway to graduation. And so it's a different diploma option that is available for our students. So that is an exciting new option that is now available.
Mrs. Whitfield?
Discussion.
Thank you. So I'm tentatively excited about the idea of elementary, like report card looking type things. I don't even want to call them a report card. What did you call them? A performance chart. I get complaints about this all the time, about people feeling like we're not letting them know what is happening when they're going to middle school and they weren't ready to realize that their kids were going to get a grade in middle school and they didn't know. So I think this fits better. The question I was going to ask you about is the research that I had looked up when I was talking with all these parents was that there wasn't really any indication of a need for report cards. Are we now leaning back towards more of a report card, or no?
These performance charts provides our teachers and our parents with additional information for our standards-based report cards. But by providing information on how our students are progressing on standards, it actually gives students a lot more information on their students' progress towards academics than just an A or a B would. This actually provides, as you saw from the example, a wealth of information on their students' progress and ability than just a simple letter grade.
Is it kind of a national, is there any national data that says that that this is important to show this kind of information to the elementary level students? Just for my own argument's sake, is this sort of where the country's headed?
We can.
No,
Are
we the first?
We are certainly not the first. There's a lot of research on this. Ken O'Connor's probably one of our leading ones, but we can certainly gather that all together
I just wanted to know, because I know that now that you're putting more information out there, there will be then questions about it this direction, wondering why they're getting information and feeling that their children are being judged. So I'm tentatively happy about it right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mrs. Andrews?
If you can make sure that there's in-service for parents. I mean, as we changed over to the standards-based report card, it was so much confusion out there with the parents not really having the in-service necessary to understand what the new process would be. So I don't know how you'll be doing that to get to parents.
Okay, and yes, ma'am, and I just want to be very cautious. This is not a change of report cards, or I just want to be very cautious.
It's just a new additional information, and people still need to be trained about what this is. So I'm wondering how you're going to get this information to parents so that they'll have a better understanding.
Dr. Robinson?
Thank you. So now I'm confused. So, because we've had the standards-based elementary report card like 16, 17, 18 years, right? And this chart that is labeled a performance chart, I thought was just a visualization of all the words that will be in the student progression plan, right? So explain to me what I'm mixing up here.
It just provides more information. It is not new information. It just provides additional information. So you're right in that it's nothing new. We're providing additional information to provide clarity. Okay. So you're correct in that these are not new concepts, they're not new items. We're just trying to provide teachers, trying to provide parents, trying to provide all of our stakeholders with additional information for their understanding.
Okay, and then just to follow up, so this may be a wee bit rhetorical, but it bugs me that we talk about the student's ability. I think a significant number of our students that are left behind because adults we haven't done what we needed to do to support them, right? And so I'm just going to put it out there because I'm going to follow up, right? So I just need to understand in a future conversation what we're going to do differently for the kids who get the below grade level, level 1, get a PMP, because it seems to me from reports from parents that all too often these plans tend to be more active on paper than in reality. And so somewhere in our future conversations, I think I need to get a grasp on how do I know as a board member that we are doing what we say we're going to do, whether we're talking about the teacher working with the student around the PMP, whether we're talking about school administration supporting the teacher to support the child, whether we're talking about the region supporting the principal to support the teacher to support the child, if you get what I'm saying, and then the board, right? So I think part of the answer comes in the disproportionate resources where they're most needed, but I want to have a conversation around that, starting with my belief system, and you can tell me you disagree, but my belief system that the vast majority of children that are not doing well because of adult failure, not child failure. Thank you.
Mrs. Andrews.
And maybe I'm just a bit confused because I remember the elementary report cards changed a few years ago, where we actually had approaching, we got away from the grades, and it was a new process. So that's something that's new. That's been in existence maybe 5 or 6 years, maybe at the most, because we got rid of the letter grades. Am I correct?
Moving away from letter grades to standards-based report cards has been, I believe, probably close to 10.
I don't know.
There was an iteration where we did have some letter grades with
here.
the standards base at the same time. We did do with the letter part of that because it provided some confusion. But each of our schools, each of the year, work on a plan to educate their parents. I know there are some communities where we need to do more of that, Ms. Andrews. Well, you know, I have conversations with the elementary principals on a regular basis to ensure that that's happening. We'll make sure that they're doing that on a regular basis. In addition, is when we hire new teachers, where sometimes confusion comes where a new teacher has never worked with a standards-based report card, and they're not articulating it well to their parents, is where we've got to make sure that we're focusing on
And that
as well.
wasn't 10 years ago. That was just recently, because it was brought up at the Academic Advisory Committee, trying to get a clear understanding as to how it was going to be functioning, maybe
There's been
5
different
years.
versions, yeah.
So
You're right.
I was a part of that. So this is just a new piece of it. That's why I said, hopefully we won't have any concern with parents not understanding. This is a new piece of it. Seems like it's easier to understand from when we started before. Thank you.
And for this year, we've asked all schools to have 2 teachers represent the cadres, one for K2 and one for 3-5, to be the report card champions on their campus, to be trained and serve as the trainers to help the other teachers on their campus have conversations around report cards and serve as the experts on their campus to help with those report card conversations. So that will be new for this year.
All right, before you move on, if this grade 4 performance chart is what you're actually going to use, somebody correct the grammar. Are able to read should be is able to read in all 4 of those places where it appears in the 3rd column, I believe, if I'm reading it correctly. The are should be changed to an is. It talks about the student instead of the students. So we just check that so that the parents don't tell us we have an error on our report cards for our kids, especially if it's a grammar grade.
Thank you. Mr. Barbieri?
Mr. Superintendent, you want to go on to the next one?
So that was our last policy item for today. So at this time, we will now turn it over to the Inspector General to do the IG workshop.